Welcome back to the GenTwenty podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Marina.
And today we're talking about imposter syndrome. So, imposter syndrome, is it a real thing?
Yes, it is. According to Psychology Today, the imposter syndrome is a psychological term referring to a pattern of behavior where people doubt their accomplishments, but also have a persistent and often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud.
Yeah. So to explain that in, I guess, kind of real life, how I realized that I had this deeply internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. A fraud for what? I'm not really sure. But I actually had this dream not too long ago where I guess I was backstage at something and someone is all of a sudden yelling at me that it's my second, I missed my cue, I need to get on stage right now, and I'm just standing there panicking because I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm like, what show is this? I have lines? Like what am I supposed to do? Where do I stand? I have no idea. Yet I could feel that there was this huge weight for me to go out there and shine and do whatever I was supposed to do, but I had no idea what that was.
Oh man, I feel like I've had dreams like that, and it's a stress dream, right? You're like so stressed when you're in it, and then when you wake up.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't even realize, like, what it actually meant until the next day, and I was recapping my whole dream to my husband, and then I was like, "Oh, shoot, wow. Yeah, I feel like an imposter."
Yeah, and it's funny. When I realized I felt like an imposter, it was the last year, like a year and a half ago, when I was just graduating from my grad program and applying to jobs. And all of these jobs would call for so much experience or so much expertise. And I just was like, I can't hit all those marks. I am a fraud. Like I've done something wrong. And it's not a good mindset to be in. Not a good
Mhm.
mindset.
Yeah. It's really weird because I think, like, for me, I kind of have a very non-traditional career path. It's pretty unconventional. And I kind of get emails fairly frequently about how I have achieved X, Y, and Z, or, um, no one has ever specifically asked me this, but I do feel a little bit like a fraud because of it. But it was about my book deal. And if you don't know, I did write a book. It came out in 2018. And shortly after it came out, a bunch of people came and asked me, like, how I got published and all of these things, and like how I got an agent. And the truth is that I don't have an agent. I did not have an agent. I was approached directly by the publisher and to submit samples. And so I did, and then they offered me the contract. But that is a very, very, very unusual way to get a book deal. And it's not something that I can really teach people how to replicate or anything like that. And I don't have any really helpful advice for people who are trying to publish a book a traditional way because it's very unusual and it's kind of not something I like to talk about very much because it does make me feel very undeserving of it.
Yeah, and this concept of like undeserving. Like why do we think we have to deserve things? Because like I feel the same way but for the opposite reason. Like I've tried to go the traditional route in getting into my ideal career path and it has never gotten me to where I want to be. And so in my mind, I'm an imposter because I'm not succeeding in the way that I think I should be and that I don't
Mhm.
deserve success because of what I've tried has failed. And
Mhm.
that like when I say it out loud to you now, I think, "Oh, you sound a little bit crazy, Marina. Why do you?" but also just, you know, if we feel like imposters when we take a traditional route and if we feel like imposters when we take an untraditional route, do you see how we're neither of us are winning here?
Mhm. Yeah, it's like accomplishments can mean something different to everyone, and it's sort of like what I feel like I've accomplished, and when people ask me things about it, that's when I feel the most like a fraud because I don't know how to explain it to other people. And I think now a lot of people, both in like personal and professional branding, there's this huge push to call yourself an expert. And I don't really feel like an expert, um, not even in my own self and in my own accomplishments and things that I have done.
Which is funny because it's all about perception. Because when I think of you, I think, oh, Nicole's an expert. She's gonna have the answers. And I ask you questions about content and marketing all the time. And you always you always seem to have an answer.
I'm so glad I come through. Yeah, I think like when other people ask me stuff, I feel very comfortable being like, I don't know, but I can try to find out. And I feel more confident doing that instead of me saying like, okay, well this is what I have figured out for myself because for some reason I feel like what I have figured out is going to be like severely questioned and people are going to be like why? Why this? Why that? And I mean this happened to me fairly recently when someone asked me a business question and it's just something that I had been doing for a long time and I never like it's been working fine for me and I've never had like experienced any issues with this particular thing. And someone was like, "Well, why do you do that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't know. Like what do you mean? Why am I doing this wrong? Like is there another way?" And they were like, "Yeah, it should be blah blah blah." And I was like, "Well, I've never heard that. So I don't know where you're getting that from, but like I never instead of like me being like questioning towards them and like why they were saying what they were saying, I was like, well, I'm wrong. And that's like a very internalized thing.
Yeah. And it's like, what does it even mean to be an expert? Like, clearly that's a rhetorical question. I know what it means to be an expert, but it's like, okay, I'm a writer. I'm not an expert at writing, but I'm a good writer. And that doesn't make me less deserving of a job or a book deal or success. But in my mind, it's kind of like what we were talking about in our last episode about perfectionism. Like, it's this idea that we have to be good enough, that we have to be at some level before we can be successful. And that is, it's imposter syndrome is just like you're always chasing a dream and an ideal, but you can never get
Mhm.
there because you have to be able to just see yourself as you are rather than see yourself through a perceived lens of someone else's point of view.
Yeah, and along with that, I don't know if you do this too, but I think with feeling like an imposter, it's like the expectations I have for other people are a lot lower than the expectations I have for myself.
Yes, me too.
And I feel like, whereas from other people, I just accept things as good enough, or, I mean, I don't, good, it doesn't even have to be enough. I'm like, oh, that's good, or, like, but for me, I'm like, no, you can do better and you can achieve a higher standard and, things like that. And kind of in the perfectionism episode, I was talking about how I'm not a perfectionist. And I don't think that I am because I think that for me, done and like good is still better than perfect. And I think it always will be. But I think that's because internally I know that I can always go back and fix something and update it or do better next time. Or it's like putting me on the path to doing better. But that's still, for me, it's like still this expectation that I can do better and that I will do better.
And that's like kind of a good way to see it because if you think about imposter syndrome and being an expert, like an imposter mindset of mine would be, well, I don't deserve to have my book published. I'm not a good enough writer. I don't write like X, Y, and Z author. But a more realistic perspective is that I am good or I'm good enough and it's not going to be perfect, but I can continue to grow. It's like I think that we have this idea that we need to have all the answers or that we have nothing to offer, but we can't always have all the answers. We're not robots. Like
Hmm.
we're not perfect. And so
Yeah, we're human beings, not human doings.
exactly. Exactly. And so when I come to you with a question, I think to myself, oh, Nicole has this experience. She has this kind of processing. I know how smart you are. And so I'm expecting you to probably have an idea, if not the perfect answer, unless it's like what's 2 plus 2, and then like we all know it's not 12. So
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how like even as we go through life like on our own paths with writing and stuff, like I think maybe a lot of it extends from like the idea we had of what we would be doing now from when we were younger. Does
Mm,
that make sense? Like,
yeah.
I mean, when you think about, like, what 25 looks like or what 30 looks like, and maybe you're not exactly where you thought you would be, or maybe where you are now doesn't feel like what you thought it would feel like.
Yeah, that's a good thought. So here's an exercise. Okay, 10 years ago when you were 20, where did you think you'd be?
Why did you have to call me out like that?
All right. Guys, Nicole just turned 30. Let's celebrate her. Big news. She's a new
But I
30.
don't know, I thought you were gonna say when you were, like, 15. That hit me
Okay.
kind of hard.
All right. Well, you keep thinking and I'll go. So 10 years ago, I was 19, right? I was a sophomore, junior in I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore in college in Pennsylvania, where I grew up in Pennsylvania. And now 10 years later, I live in California. I like I'm not where I thought I'd be, but not because I've failed, just because I like took a huge turn left and moved to the West Coast. And so I think I've had to let go of what I thought my late 20s would look like because I went away from a path that would get me to where I thought I'd be. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Are you still mad that I called you out?
Yeah. No, I think it's really funny. I don't know, like, you knew, like, 10 years ago when you were 15, I was thinking, like, of your dreams you have when you're, like, 10, and then when you said 20, I was like, "What? What do you mean?"
I don't remember what I wanted to do when I was 10. That's why I asked.
It just, like, really shocked me to, like, hear it like that. Like, I thought you were gonna say, like, "Oh, when you were 12." And you were like 10 years ago when you were 20, and I was like, What do you mean?" That wasn't 10 years ago, that was like 2 years ago.
Oh, sorry.
I'm crying a little bit, it's okay. It's just really funny to me. Okay. Anyway, okay, so when I was 20, I would have been, oh, I don't know, either a sophomore, I guess, in college, something like a junior in college? Something like that, I don't know. And I mean, I always knew that I was gonna have my own business. I didn't know what it would look like then. I don't always know what it looks like even now that I have one, which is probably part of my imposter syndrome. Um, and I think a lot of imposter syndrome comes from comparing yourself to other people as well. And I don't think I directly compare myself to other people, but like when I have my metrics that I think are good and then other people have metrics that are maybe 10 times my metrics that they're like, "Well, this isn't quite where I want it to be." I'm like, "Okay, okay. Well, obviously I have no idea what I'm doing here at this table then. Goodbye." But I think wait, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to agree. I just read a book a couple months ago by Sally Rooney, and it's the most beautiful book. And when I finished it, I was like, this is the book I want to write. And I looked her up and realized that she had written it. She's my exact age, and she wrote it 2 years ago when she was 27. And I was
Mhm.
like, I'm a fraud. But I'm not. I'm just different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like all of our paths are different, and I don't think that like there's an age limit on achieving your dreams and things like that. And I don't think age really has much to do with anything. And I think even experience doesn't have much to do with anything because you can be in totally different parts of your life and have experienced totally different things. But like we're all still bringing something to the table, and it doesn't have to be the same thing, and that doesn't make you a fraud if you don't know the same things as other people. Because I think for me, like my entrepreneurial journey it's very solo. Like I've never really brought other people into it until this year, and that has taught me a lot about different metrics that other people think are important for themselves, where it's things that it doesn't even bother me that a number isn't like high or low, and like some of my numbers are higher than other people, and they ask me how to get there and I don't have an answer for them, and that makes me feel like a little bit like a fraud sometimes. But I mean, it's just like back to the original question, when I'm absolutely actually the queen of answering the question in a very roundabout way. That's what I really thrive in, and I can take a question completely off topic like I just did. But anyway, back when I was 20, what I thought when I would be 30 was that I would have my own business. I did think I would be a mom by now, which I am. And I think, again, it's just like, I don't know if it just feels different than I thought it would in some ways, because I think the biggest thing is I don't always have answers to how I've done things that I've done.
Hmm.
And I think that's what makes me feel like really brings out my imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So so if you know what brings out your imposter syndrome, what can you do to kind of move away from it? Like what can any of us do to move away from the imposter mindset?
Um, I think one of the biggest things we can do is to collaborate with other people, no matter what your career path looks like. I think it's important to talk to people who are where you are at also in your career, who are where you want to be in 5 years in your career, and even people who are 5 years behind you
Yeah.
on their own path. Because I think that collaboration and just working with other people is so, so important. And I think it helps us all to feel less like a fraud when we know that other people don't know things as well. And I think that it's something that we should normalize more is saying, I don't know.
Oh yeah. I At my last job, I told my manager that I didn't know something, but that I would look it up. And she pulled me aside and told me not to admit that I didn't know things, and that if I ever had to Google something, to pretend that I already knew it.
My
And
mouth just dropped open.
I know, and I think about when I work with Nicole and we're collaborating, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Let me just Google it." And she's like, "I'll Google it too, and let's see if we get the same answer." And it's like there's it's a good thing to not know things, because that means we can like know where we're coming from and grow and move forward. And I think the fear of not knowing is what pigeonholes us into feeling like imposters too, because again, if
Yeah,
we think we don't know, we don't talk, we just won't speak up. And
it's okay not to know things. And no matter where you're at in your career, and I think it's so strange that your manager would have said that to you. Like, because I feel like it's completely normal not to know something.
yeah, it was not a great day for me.
Yeah. And I feel like I don't maybe she wanted you to phrase it differently where you were like, I'm not sure. I'm going to do some research and get back to you." But it's
Yeah,
like
it could be.
it feels most natural to say, "I don't know. Let me see if I can find out."
Yeah, like in my mind, I was showing initiative that I was researching, and I solved the problem. It was like a question about Excel, and I figured out how to do it and taught myself and then taught her. And I was just like, this is a success. Like, we fixed the problem. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess. But yeah, also, I'm the queen of making things off topic. Going back to, collaborating and working with people who are in a similar space or in a space ahead of you or behind you. I think we talked about this on our last episode, but you can't create things in a vacuum. And so, and also comparison in a very, like, if you compare yourself to someone else without perspective, that will cause you to be more scared. But if you understand where everyone's coming from, it's easier to kind of rationalize, okay, I'm here because I've done this, and they're over there because they did that. I i felt that way when I joined my group coaching with Serena, who we had on the podcast a couple episodes ago. When I first started talking to the 9 other women in my group, we were all in a similar space, but we were all coming from such different places and different ages and different experiences that I immediately felt so much better about how I was unhappy at my job, because I was like, oh, I'm not alone. Everyone is going through something similar. So it's not just me who's like failing at being happy at her job. I'm not an imposter. I'm not a fraud. We're all in the same boat. And so I think seeking out like minded people or people in similar situations helps with feeling like combating that imposter mindset. And, you can join peer groups, or if you don't want to talk to your coworkers about work things, you can talk to your friends and find a mentor. I think, help me out here. Help me out here. Get me
Yeah,
off this train of thought.
I think, hearing you say all that, one thing that also comes to mind is learning how to phrase everything that you've done in a positive light, even if you feel like it's not the most on brand or the most, like, leading to your success. Because I feel like I know some people who are very, very skilled at putting the way that they pivoted their career from one thing to another. Like, they wouldn't say, "Oh, that didn't work out for me." They would say, "Oh, I was working in finance, but I realized that I really enjoyed working with people one-on-one more than working on a computer all day. So I moved to career counseling." I don't know, that's
Hmm.
the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, it's true.
Or yeah,
It's
something like
just
that.
it's a thoughtful communication of your pivot.
Whereas, like, instead of, I mean, and maybe internally they, like, really just hated finance, but, like, they would never describe it that way to other people, you know? Maybe that's them putting on their own rose-colored glasses, but I think that it's okay to look, with some rose-colored glasses on sometimes in cases where you feel like a fraud when you're really not one. And I think just, yeah, just putting things in a positive light and, like, a positive framework can make you feel more rooted in who you are as a person and what you're doing with your life.
I agree. I agree.
So that wraps up today's episode on imposter syndrome. Thank you so much for listening to the Gen20 podcast. We'd love if you leave us a review or just even a rating, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.